Welcome to Story Chats at Inspy Romance. I'm Elizabeth Maddrey, and I'm here today with my two co-hosts.
I'm Narelle Atkins.
I'm Valerie Comer.
So today we are talking about books with the stranded together trope. So this trope, I feel like it's a little harder to find, especially in Christian fiction. It's characterized by the hero and heroine being stuck together with no one around to help and no easy way to get away from each other. So usually there's an accident or act of nature or some such thing, feels like, to make that happen. It's similar to, there's another trope called forced proximity, which is where like the hero and heroine just have to be around each other all the time. Like they work in the same tiny little office, or he's her bodyguard when she's running for president, so he has to be, that kind of thing. But it's not that they can't get away from each other because like they got buried by an avalanche, which would be stranded together. So we're sticking with stranded, but if you worked a forced proximity into it, no one will be murdered as a result of choosing the wrong book. That pretty much applies across the board, because that feels like it would be effort and I don't feel like expending it. So
I think it's forced proximity to the next level.
Sure. Yeah. Plus
And not all forced proximity is stranded together,
right.
But every stranded together has an aspect of forced proximity.
Yes.
Say
yes,
that 10 times fast.
No.
Yes.
But no, that's true. There we go. All right. So do you have thoughts on stranded? Love it, hate it, something in between? Valerie?
I do. I love it.
Okay.
Someone once said there are like basically 3 plots in all of fiction, and that is man versus himself, man versus others, and man versus nature. So, or woman, So, but in stranded together stories, nature becomes a character. And so I don't think, maybe you guys can prove me wrong, but I didn't think of it as the stranded together is somehow linked to a force of nature in my mind.
Okay.
And so they're 2 opposing characters, but they're forced to work together work together just like for their very survival against nature. Yeah. So I kind of like it. It adds an element of adventure without it necessarily being a mystery or a suspense, as in, there's not necessarily a bad guy with a gun out there, but nature can be just as deadly.
Yeah. Or deadlier. Yeah.
Deadlier.
Yeah. Narelle?
Well, I do. I love this one. And I agree. The 3 books that I've chosen for today are all related to weather events. And so basically something happens with nature and the weather or whatever, and it ends up being stranded together. And I've always seen that different to forced proximity. And forced proximity is more something I'll probably think of in the general market romance. Okay. And probably because it goes back to the days when I first started writing, and there were all these rules of things that you can and can't do in contemporary Christian romance. And one of them was you don't want your hero and heroine unchaperoned in a hotel room or a house with potential for things that happen between men and women when they're stranded together. So I think that's probably forced proximity. I probably think more in terms of a romantic context, whereas stranded together is often the most unromantic situation that you could actually come across, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so that's where I probably see the distinction. And I think that's why we see stranded together happening more often in CCR than we would forced proximity. If it's in some respects in terms of being stranded, ignoring work, because work is obviously forced proximity for various reasons. Yeah.
So I didn't put this on our question sheet, but I'm going to ask. But I like stranded a lot. When I think about my mom, I know that she would have, so we're talking, older generation. She would have a big problem with stranded together in Christian fiction, because even though there's a big weather event going on. Generally, by the time they're stranded, there's at least interest. Generally speaking, they're not stranded from the very get-go of the book. Sometimes they are. But do you think that Christian readers struggle with having stranded in their CCR because it does have them together unchaperoned
overnight at least, or usually.
Yeah.
Otherwise they're not really stranded.
Right, possibly for days, like, for days all alone in, the snow cave that they dug with their own two hands or whatever, I mean, do you think that's an issue?
I think it could be for some readers. For me, it's not. And it also depends on how the book's written as well. And sure. I think a lot has to do with the story set up and the way the story is written. So I think it potentially could be. And as I said, that was one of the rules, that you didn't have people overnight in a situation. If there was a bed anywhere near, that was like terrible. No bed, no sofa, no anything comfortable to lie down on.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely could be a concern for some readers. But for me personally, it's not something that I've ever really thought about as a reader.
I think it would depend on the individual story in some ways. Just thinking over some of the ones that I've got 6 here I could talk about. So, and I'm not going to, but there's some, a variety of circumstances, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And some of them really just take up like a couple of chapters in the middle, whereas others are like from beginning to end. And so I think there's such a variety of ways that this can theoretically happen that I would say it depends. Although I do know that, yeah, the love inspired line in particular, that's just like a huge no-no. It's just,
yeah.
If you're going to be stranded together, Granny had better be there too.
Stranded, yeah. They need a chaperone. I have a friend who wrote a Stranded, and she got some reviews. Like they're completely stranded, like on a basically like a desert island, right? And they got mad that she didn't have him build 2 separate huts, like, little lean-tos to protect them from the tsunami kind of thing. Like he built 1 survival shelter instead of 2 survival shelters. So yeah, I mean, I just thought it was kind of funny. So to me, I don't have a problem with it. I feel like people who are going to do anything are like, there's a floor. You're gonna find a way to do what you want to do, regardless. If this is your character, then that is what you're going to do, and it doesn't matter whether or not there's an actual bed in the room. So anyway, I thought it was funny. But, obviously, if you are one who really likes to avoid any potential possible appearance of evil, the stranded together trope is probably not going to be one that you should seek out, because it's very likely that there are potentially compromising positions to be had, just by the nature of the setup.
Even though our characters probably aren't going to succumb to those.
Right. Absolutely.
And if they're thinking about survival, it could be the last thing on their mind is to be thinking about ways to, when they're trying to survive and need food and
food and water, shelter.
Yeah. Like
a safe place to go to the bathroom. These are better things to worry about.
Yeah.
True. All right. So let's talk stranded books. Narelle, you go first.
Well, I'm going to talk about, firstly, the most recent stranded book I've read, which is Ruby Radiance by Valerie. And I talked about this a few months back, or a month or 2 back, this book. And it ticks all the boxes for me for stranded, because it's the Pot of Gold geocaching series. And our heroine, Trinity, she's sight impaired, and volunteers to do the geocaching and gets put into a group. And then we have Dale, who recently lost his wife and is very angry of God, and there are a whole bunch of reasons. And he gets his arm twisted by his brother, who says, I'll look after the communication shop, or you can go off and do this. And so there's a group of 4, and in this group there's this awful, I think she was blonde, this awful girl who's just
figuratively blonde anyway.
Yes. Oh, she was just awful. She was just she was there looking for a husband, and Dale's trying to avoid her like the plague, because sees hiking as a way of doing all the things that people don't want to read stranded books about. So she's got an agenda. And then there's this other guy who's in it. He's really good. He's more mature and is a genuine hiker and into geocaching. And so because Trinity has the sight impairment issues with the Best disease, if I've remembered the right one, she's a bit slower and a bit more careful on the track. And she and Dale kind of fall a bit behind the other two. And I think it's not even that. I think they just wanted some separation from this awful woman that they're trying to both avoid.
The man-eater.
Yes. And there's this landslide, and they end up getting trapped together. And it's not the entire story, they're stranded together. But what it really did was he got injured when they by the landslide, and he was protecting her. Oh, he was just so heroic. I really like Dale. I love this book. But anyway, and it's more a case of it was the forced proximity, in the sense that they're out in the wild and there could be bears, because we're in Montana, so that completely freaks me out before we even start. And how do they survive, and what have they got left? And she's so resourceful, Trinity. She has this backpack she carries of all these things, because something could go wrong. And I just love the way that when they were both put under pressure with this really stressful situation, with him injured and she's having trouble seeing stuff because her glasses aren't as good as they were, or she couldn't find them. There were different things that happened, that we really got to see what their characters were like, and actually got to know each other and got beyond the pleasantries of just walking and hiking. And it sort of swung the dynamics of the story into a certain direction. So it was a very key pivotal moment in the story. So this is a good one if you like Stranded Together.
Yeah, thank you.
Agreed. It was on my list too.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it
doesn't surprise me.
No. And their stranding was a relatively short space of time.
Yeah, 2 or 3 chapters, I think, as I recall.
Yeah. It was still really, I liked it too. I'm sorry, my dog keeps losing his ball next to me and then he wants me to play. And I'm like, not yet. There are other people in this house. Go play with them.
Yes.
All right, Valerie, what's your first?
The first one that I had is a book by Denise Hunter called Sweetbriar Cottage. Noah thinks he and Josephine are divorced. They'd had a whirlwind romance and gotten married, and then she wanted out not long after, and he's like, I don't know what went wrong. And he thought he'd signed all the papers that were needed until the IRS came calling and said, about your wife. And he's like, I don't have a wife. And they're like, yes, you do. So he has to contact her and go, I thought you filed all the papers. And she's like, oh, that pile of papers underneath that other pile of papers that I never quite got around to dealing with. I'm sorry. Anyways, she'd missed more than one step. He confronts her. It does not go well. And when she finally gets all the paperwork ready for his final signature, there's a blizzard brewing, and she has to drive up the mountain because she can't wait because it needs to be done. She's up to here. So even though the weather is looking like it's going to turn ugly, she feels like she needs to make the trek up the mountain to where he lives for him to sign these papers, and she'll be fine, and she'll get back to town and she'll file them and she'll never have to look at him again. Of course, that's not how it goes, because they are stranded together in his house, and they do have to go. I'm trying to remember why. It's been a couple of years since I read this one, but they do have to go out. I think there was horses, and they go out on a snowmobile and they run out of fuel, and there's a whole lot of Stranded. There is an entire probably 100,000 word novel full of Stranded in this one, and a blizzard. The story has them chasing all over the terrain on a snowmobile, and finally they're forced I guess nobody can force you to actually talk about what went wrong. And spoiler alert, they reconcile.
I know, it's so shocking. I read a book, it's a writing craft book the other day that talks about how you don't give spoilers for stuff. And then like she spends 2 pages on how the fact that the couple ends up together at the end of a romance novel is not a spoiler. And people need to get over themselves if they think it is. Like,
Yeah.
preach it, because that's why you're reading romance.
And
So.
it's only the love triangle trope that can throw a spanner in the works, but we won't go down that road.
We've been there. We've done the roundabout on that one.
Yeah. That sounds fun. I'll have to look for that one.
I think it's in my TBR. It's the blurb is sounding familiar.
Yeah. It's unique in that usually in a romance novel, you've got quite a wide supporting cast. You've got brothers or sisters, friends, you know, the neighbors next door. And this one is like 99% Noah and Josephine, because they're stranded together pretty much from chapter 1.5 to chapter 84. Okay, I'm probably not 40, it's a long book. But so there's not a whole lot of people kind of getting in their way. They do that all by themselves.
Cool. All right. So my first one is actually Stranded at the Sandbar by Jess Mastorakos. It is sweet, not Christian. But I mean, all it's missing is a faith arc. It otherwise would be perfectly good for Christian. I know sometimes sweet is starting to creep into a little, like, they'll have content that maybe Christian readers are not as necessarily interested in, but this one is still squeaky clean. So it's part of her Kailua Marine, so set in Hawaii. And Kate and Tyler had met previously and they shared a kiss, and then she totally ghosted him because she has terrible taste in men, basically. And she chases these losers basically because she likes a project. Effectively, she thinks she can fix these guys, and then when it turns out that you can't fix someone because that's not how solid, worthwhile relationships are made, you know, she ends up getting her heart stomped on, but she just keeps going back to these losers. So she ends up moving to Hawaii, and because she's I believe a sister of someone in this friend group. So she's around Tyler, and Tyler's like, no way, no how. No way, no how. Not after like been down that road and saw the warning sign, and I'm not going there again. But they end up stranded in the ocean, and he's injured. And so they find a place where they can like at least not drown on the Sandbar. Yeah. And so it's really fun. And
is this the one where there should have been 2 shelters?
Yes, this is the one where there should have been 2 shelters.
Gotcha.
Like he's injured and he's building any shelter. Let's give him props for that. And so yeah, it's cute. I love her Marines. They're all heroic and swoony, and I just enjoy these books a lot. So Stranded at the Sandbar.
I probably have that one in my Kindle. I've got 3 or 4 of Jess's books there, and I read a handful of them. Oh, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago. Can't remember exactly when. And then, yeah, relatively recently, I went on a little buying binge and picked up more, but I haven't gotten into them yet. So I need to get there sometime soon.
Yeah,
maybe
I have some of them
in my next or what have you read episode?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some in my TBR as well, but I keep thinking I'll have a Hawaii binge because she has a lot of books set in Hawaii.
She does. She has a whole 6-book series set there. Plus, I think one from the San Diego Marines has a good piece of it in Hawaii. So, yeah. So there's a lot of Hawaii.
She's a Marine wife. Yeah. Stationed in Hawaii, if I recall.
She is currently stationed in Hawaii. Yes. Yeah.
So well, she's not writing about something that she only dreams of.
Right.
No. Hopefully she hasn't done that stranded thing.
No. Or if she did, it was with her husband. Let's hope.
So in that case, one shelter would have been fine.
Right. Well, that's true.
Got
That's
it.
true.
Got it. Got it.
They need a
Great.
second one for their 4 kids. All right. Who did I? Narelle, you're next, right?
Okay, well, my stranded book has 1,000 chaperones.
Excellent.
Literally.
My
So
goodness.
the one I'm going to talk about, which I have spoken about a while ago, it's a Christmas book, is Christmas at Gate 18 by Amy Matayo. And this book, we have Rory, who's a supermodel, a fashion model, who's been doing a shoot in the Dominican Republic, and it's December 23rd. And so she's been working there for a few days and needs to go home from there. She has to go do something in LA and then go back to Seattle for Christmas to get away from this supposedly glamorous life that is just very exhausting and tiring for her. And so she's ready for a break, ready for a rest, ready to go home. And Colt is the bored playboy whose father's like a Hollywood executive, and he's basically just has been cruising around, not really doing much, and his father's quite domineering. So he ran away to the Caribbean, or the Caribbean, if I say it the American way. We call it the Caribbean in Australia. And so he's been on holidays, and so he's been summoned back by his father to go back to LA for Christmas. So in the middle of all this, we have a hurricane brewing. And so they're at Gate 18 is where their flight's going from. And of course, the what I call the board of death. When you see this happen, flight cancelled, flight cancelled, flight cancelled. It's just awful. And that's what happens. And all the flights get cancelled because there's this event of nature happening that they just can't take off and land in safely, which creates very interesting reactions in people. I've actually seen a grown man throw a tantrum in an airport because there was a storm and he could not get on this plane that he needed to go on. But anyway, it's another story. So they get basically stuck, and it's clean. I don't think there's a faith arc in this one. It's like Jess's book that you were talking about. There's nowhere to be into forced proximity with no one around because we are in an airport. So if you've got concerns about that, you're not going to have a problem with this one. But it was really, it was a really fun story, and it's a really short time frame, obviously, because it's happening over a matter of hours or days as opposed to weeks and months. And just really fun watching these characters, basically, who they're complete strangers, know nothing about each other, getting stuck together, and how they actually manage the stress of that situation.
Remind me in fall to read this one. You've mentioned it before, and it sounds really cool, and I have not read it, and I keep forgetting.
I keep forgetting too, and then every time you talk about it, I think of it because I love the Valerie hasn't. Have you seen Narelle, the Tom Hanks movie where he's stuck in the airport in New York City? Yeah.
I can't think of the name of it though, but I've seen it. Yeah,
I can't either. But
me either. Surprise.
Every time you mention this book, I think of that movie and how much I enjoyed it. And I'm like, I need to read this book because I am probably one of few people in the world. I love airports. I love them. I love walking around in the little secured areas and seeing the things and sitting in the seats and watching the people. I love airports.
I don't like getting stranded in airports.
Well, I have never been stranded for more than 36 hours in an airport. So maybe if it went on for longer than that, I would hate airports. But
I think you got me beat, but I was stranded for a few hours once. So anyway.
All right, what's your next one, Valerie?
If you are a reader who is concerned about what things look like, then you might want to pass on this one. This is Capsized by Laurie Larsen. And Jet Martin is a personal trainer who loves to sail his 33-foot yacht in long distance races. One of his clients is a nursing student, Sadie. She is an adrenaline junkie, or she wants to be one anyways. She's made, one of the things that she's doing is she wants to run a marathon in every state, and she's running her 5th as the story opens. And Jet had set her up for her training program. She isn't training with him now, but he set up her training regimen, a year or two ago. And they run into each other at the gym, and he's like, oh, I've got this yacht. And she's like, oh, that sounds cool. And they bump into each other a couple of times, and he invites her out, and she's enthralled with the sailing part, and she's happy to help him, they play around on how it all works, and he's planning to do, which really is going to be a rich boys kind of a race between Rhode Island and Bermuda.
Ooh.
And then something happens and he can't do it solo, and he's looking for a partner, and he thinks of Sadie. Now, she's only sailed that one time for like 2 or 3 hours, but he's like, but she can follow directions and I can do most of it. He's cracked some ribs, so he can't do everything. But between them, he's good at giving orders, she's good at accepting them. They'll be fine, except they're not, right? So this is a case where it's forced proximity. They force it on themselves by agreeing to go to race this together. And it's a race that takes place over several days. And there are things that go wrong, as you may or may not guess from the title.
Yeah, the title doesn't bode well. You might as well call it
Gilligan's Island. It doesn't at all.
Yeah.
So, but it is definitely, in my mind, it fit the stranded together trope as well, because I guess if it had gone well, it would have only been a forced proximity. How about that?
There you go.
Spoiler alert.
Look at you.
But yeah, they are forced to depend on each other. I'm going to say in ways they hadn't expected to, and that sounds terrible, but that's not what I'm innuendoing at all. Just that it's not as easy. Not that they expected easy, because it's a grueling race, but yeah. Anyway, if you are looking for something with sailboats and people who are knowingly going on a boat together for several days and nights, then you may enjoy Capsized by Laurie Larsen.
See, I would assume everything's going wrong because it's deep ocean sailing.
Yeah.
There's so many things that can go wrong.
And the title.
Yeah.
Title is sort of a
and the
giveaway.
weather.
Title's a big hit.
I don't know if there's pirates in that part of the world, but you can also come across pirates and all sorts of fun things in the middle of the ocean.
You should write your own.
Yes.
You have ideas that Laurie did not have.
I don't think generally we have pirates. I think those tend,
but you don't know.
I don't know. I will fully admit that I don't know. I don't know. But we don't hear about them, and I think we might. We hear about pirates in other parts of the world, so I would think if we had local pirates, we would hear about them. But maybe not.
I think pirateering is a little different than it was a couple hundred years ago.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. But had you told me they were just sailing around a bay or a harbour for 2 days, then I'd be thinking that could be a problem for readers.
Yeah.
Because lots of time with not a lot of drama. Yeah.
So my next one I have also talked about before. And it is Forgiven by the Hero by Tara Grace Ericson.
That's my next one.
No, not anymore.
I have extras, hey.
And this is a snowstorm, massive snowstorm, which strands them. He is out training his search and rescue dogs. When the storm comes up unexpectedly, they get to this cabin that he knew was there, where she is holed up writing a novel. So they get snowed in together, and it's fun. You've got dogs, which is fabulous, and you've got one of the dogs in this book is actually named after my dog. She has a Dobby dog. My dog is Dobby, which obviously is from Harry Potter. It's not like I came up with this name, but the Dobby in Forgiven by the Hero is because Tara used to laugh hearing, we would sometimes video chat, and we still do sometimes video chat, and my Dobby is a very vocal schnauzer. I'm honestly surprised at how quiet he is when we're recording podcasts, because he sings, and he stands on his hind legs and sings, and just he has all sorts of hilarious noises that he makes when he wants
to hear that sometime.
Yeah.
Would he do that now for us? Would he stop and do that now for us?
I don't know. I don't have a treat. What do you have?
You don't have a treat. What
I
kind of
don't
a
have
dog
a
mom
treat
are
with
you?
me. I will next time we record, I'll see if I can get Dobby to sing for us.
Yeah.
Because he is quite the vocalist. And so the Dobby in the book also will sing and dance on his hind legs, which I think is fun. But anyway, it's a great story, and there's some mistaken or hidden identity in there as well. It's not mistaken, it's hidden. And it's just fun. But again, if you're worried about impropriety, there isn't any that happens, but they are in a cabin with multiple bedrooms on their own in the snow. I don't know if dogs qualify as chaperones.
I doubt it.
Probably
They're pretty game for whatever.
yeah, right, for sure. We could probably do one more if you guys have one more. Do you have another one, Narelle?
I do, and I'll only talk quickly about this one because I have spoken about it before, and that's his Baby Bond by Tobin McClain, and that's a Stranded in the Snow one, which is very fun. So Kendra is she looks in winter. She looks after these cabins up in Colorado in the mountains, and she also has a fabric art business. And she doesn't have a lot of money. And her sister and brother-in-law have passed away in a skiing accident, and they have a baby, Sarah. So she's now looking after the 9-month-old baby who's just lost their parents. So that's been a bit of a big learning curve for her. And then we have the hero Zeke, and he has a lot of money. He's a multimillionaire, possibly a billionaire. I can't quite remember exactly. And so he rocks up and rents a cabin, and his goal is to set a legal case up so he can get full custody of his brother's daughter, of his niece. So we have a custody issue going on between the uncle and the aunt. And as you can see, they're probably not very good friends. So it's more enemies to love, this particular story. And of course, it's Colorado and it's winter and it snows. And so we have a snowstorm and they do get stranded together in the story. That it's not the only thing that happens in the story, but it's definitely a part of the story that makes this book even better. So it's one of my favorites. I like this series. You'll hear me talk about the yep.
Lee
like
does
these
tropes really well.
Yes.
And to hear that, and I have read this one, it's been a while ago and I don't have super clear memories of it, but you've got the custody thing, you've got the rich guy, poor girl, you've got the stranded together, you've got
suddenly appearance.
Yes.
She's good at shoehorning in half a dozen tropes, and it's kind of like stir and see what product we're getting this time around. Because that she really excels at that, I think.
What's your third, Valerie?
Third, fourth, fifth, who's counting? I have also mentioned this one before. I Still Do by Melanie D. Snitker. It is a reunion romance after divorce. Kara is still friends with some of her ex's family. She agrees to go on a ski retreat that his grandfather had set up before he passed away, because she had been really close with him, and the grandfather had specifically asked for her to come, and then he died before it happened. She believed that her ex, Gray, would not be present. Hello, he is. Because otherwise it wouldn't be a reunion romance. They are stranded together in a blizzard, part of the time with his family and part of the time not. So I think, blizzards really lend themselves very well to stranded together, but I'm glad that we found a few other angles to explore as well today.
All right, so my last one then, I feel like I've done this a lot lately, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's one of mine. Is Hope for Love. It's Royal and Sophie, and they get stranded in Arizona, so there's no snowstorm. And it's just one night. They end up, their car breaks down and they end up having to walk for help after.
I had forgotten that Stranded Together was in that one.
Yeah. So
I didn't know if there was enough stranded to include it.
There might not
down
be.
My list.
There might not be, but I didn't have a third one. So since we went for a third one, I'm like, well, I wrote one. So, sort of. So, but yeah, they're not super stranded.
But that just shows there's so many levels of stranded, from being in the middle of an ocean with, nobody around at all, to a snowstorm where you are pretty sure if you can just hang in there, you'll, another day or two, you'll be able to get out, to just all these different aspects of it that either take up, a chapter or 5 chapters or 30.
Yeah.
It's a lot of scope in
but their stranding is sort of pivotal to their relationship progression. So maybe that helps.
Yeah, I think that would probably, mind you, I would hope that none of us would include that in a story or anything really that didn't matter.
No,
although
true.
There's padding.
That's what editors are for. All right. Final stranded thoughts. No. All right.
I'm writing
fun
one
stories.
Right now.
They're fun to write. They're
are.
fun to read. You're writing one now?
Yeah.
Did I know that? Did I know that one is stranded in it? I don't think I knew that.
Wow.
I'm excited. Now I know.
The Choose Me for Always cowboy.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And give us a little hint. What type of stranding is it?
It might be a blizzard.
Might be a blizzard.
And now I'm thinking, really, I should have been more inventive than that.
I mean,
I like blizzards.
No, you're in Montana, so
it is Montana.
Yeah, blizzards are a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So we've got that, and we've got the whole Runaway Bride, and we're having a good time here.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right, so we would love to know what stranded books you enjoy. Did we miss any? Or if you hate the stranded trope, let us know why. Or if you love it, let us know that as well. Leave us a comment either on the YouTube or on our Facebook page, but nobody ever comments on our Facebook page. So mostly just leave us a comment on the YouTube channel at this point. And while you're over there, be sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. You can find more information about the podcast at inspiromance.com/storychats. And we will see you next week. In the meantime, don't forget to fall in love with a good book. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.